be better. We can learn to not make those same mistakes as they made, right? Isn't it far better to learn from history and people falling on their face so that we don't fall on our face? We can learn from the Old Testament, from a generation of people. There was a time in which Joshua, who came right after Moses, was the leader of the sons of Israel. And then as time went by, he led according to the will of God. And then another person came when Joshua passed away. Then you have Judah. In this period of time, you can summarize it by saying they believed for a time and then they fell away. That's the summary of this idea. But to be more specific, under the leadership of Judah, this new generation that came up after Joshua, they did in the beginning what was right in the sight of God, and they went and they conquered lands that they were meant to possess. And not only did they conquer the lands, but they conquered the people. And they destroyed them, not allowing them to live in the land. However, eventually all that stopped. They stopped fighting. They stopped conquering. They stopped getting rid of all the people that were in the land. And God, because he knows everything, he recognized that iniquity. He recognized what they were doing was wrong. And he addressed it. And he reminded them of what he had done for them. We know this, reading through the book of Exodus. What did he do for them? He brought them out of the land of Egypt by holding their hand, bringing them through the water. He fed them with manna. For 40 years in the wilderness, their clothes did not wear out. He did so much for them. He reminded this new generation of what he had done for his fathers, for their fathers, and the agreement that was made, the covenant. The covenant that was on tablets of stone, the covenant in which you had to have blood sprinkled on the people and on the tablets. He reminded them of the agreement. And because they were doing what was wrong in his sight, he punished them. And undoubtedly, what happens when we get punished? I've been spanked before. I've been beat before, if I can use that word. You cry out. You cry out. And God in his mercy, that is his kindness, is saying, you know what? Even though you're crying out to me and I'm punishing you, I feel sorry for you. And he gave them a judge. Hearing their plea, he gave them a judge. And for the sake of the judge, the one that was helping them, he brought peace. Great. No more spankings, right? He brought peace to the land for the sake of that judge. But then again, as human history goes, they stopped listening again once that judge died. And the story repeats itself. That'd be a sad story if it just ended like that. If the lesson stopped there, wouldn't it? They just stopped listening. But fortunately, we have the opportunity to learn from them. There's some good that can come from what happened to them in our life. And the first thing that I want us to talk about today is the new generation failed because they stopped striving to conquer the lands. Is there a new slide? Thank you, sir. They stopped striving to conquer the lands. And I didn't have my thingy on, so that's why. Okay, learn from that mistake too. Okay. So, again, Judah, the leader, initially, they were victorious in all their battles. They were fighting war after war after war, defeating the enemies of God, those that filled their lives with this idolatry, and they killed them by the thousands. They even went so far as to cut off their thumbs and cut off their toes in these battles. Nevertheless, God was fighting for them. God was fighting for them. But over time, as the story goes, they started allowing the enemies of God to live in the land. And it just wasn't a few, it was many. It was tribe after tribe after tribe that they would allow to live in the land. And essentially, they stopped striving in the work. They stopped striving to get the lands. And as a result, they gave up their strength because God was fighting the battles for them. They gave up their strength. And God was not just doing it for himself, for his plan. He was doing it for them. Now, recall with me Gideon. You guys, some of you know the story of Gideon. Gideon was a brave warrior, right? That's what he was called by God. He's a brave warrior. And God says he's going to go and take care of these Midianites. And so Gideon goes and he gathers people. He gathers about 22,000 people. Then God says, lest you think that you're going to win this battle, by your strength, I want you to get rid of some of these people. And this is what I want you to do. Ask the people, if any of them are afraid, tell them to go home. Tell those people to go home. And so you know what happened? There were some people that were afraid, and some people went home. And the number dropped from 22,000 people to 10,000. God said, okay, you know what? It's still not enough. That's not enough. I don't want you to think that you're going to win this battle by your strength. This is what I want you to do. Tell those people to go down to the water, and anybody that licks up or laps up the water like a dog, I don't know why they were doing this. If anybody laps up the water like a dog, they need to go home. And it dropped from 10,000 to 300. That's a lot of people drinking water like a dog. But it came down to 300 people, from 10,000 to 300. And God says, okay, now go fight this battle. They had to go up against a group of people as numerous as the locusts. Any of y'all ever been around locusts? I've never been around locusts. I had to look this up. A swarm of locusts can have hundreds of thousands of locusts. 300 people, hundreds of thousands. By any standard of man, that's not going to work. They're going to lose. But with God, it was possible because he was their strength. They needed God, and God was going to do it for them. So then, we're in Omaha, Nebraska. And we have people around us that we probably haven't met. We have people around us that need to hear the love of God. We know this. We can look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 12. It talks about loving all people. And those same people, I'm about to get very deep with you. Those same people are enslaved by the enemy. For some of you, that might go over your head. Let me explain it. You're enslaved. They're enslaved by the enemy. They're enslaved by Satan. They're enslaved by the devil. That is the ultimate enemy for all of us and to God. He's against God. And they are a slave to lies, to deceitfulness, to schemes that make it seem like the truth when it's not. For those of you that don't know, just think about the Garden of Eden. Who caused Adam and Eve to sin? It was the serpent. That was wrong in the sight of God. This person is the father of lies because he was a liar from the beginning. But it tells us from 1 Thessalonians that we are to excel still more. We are to go out there, love the people that are enslaved, that are the enemies of God, and excel still more. That for us, people, that's for us, that's the land that we have today. You understand? I'm giving a picture. It's a figure of speech now. I'm transitioning. That is the lands that we have to conquer today. We as people of God do not get the ability to just sit at home isolated from the rest of the world. We have to go out there and do our best to in a sense, conquer the lands. Go out and talk to people. Tell them the truth. Love the people so that they can understand the love of God. So they can know that Jesus is real. So that they can know God is real. We have to conquer the lands. We have to keep working and striving. We have to excel still more in that. But you can't go out there. You can't go out there. We can't go out there. Let's say this, because I'm in this boat too. We can't go out there without being fully prepared. We may think that we can walk out there and not have any covering on us. Even a good warrior is going to have some armor. We know this. You probably know where I'm going with this already. Ephesians. It talks about the armor of God, right? I think he illustrates it like that perfectly because he's God, but it helps to understand what we're going to do, because even in Ephesians it talks about how our battle is not with the flesh and blood, but it's a spiritual battle with wicked things happening in heavenly places. We have to put on truth, the belt of truth. That is a discernment and an understanding of the scriptures. It takes time to look into that Bible that you have there and read it with understanding. Or if you don't read it, listen to it. That's another good way. Being able to distinguish the differences between the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Christian walk, all that. Having that understanding in mind. Being able to look at these different genres. What do I mean by genres? Looking at the narrative, the storyline, looking at the more poetic stuff, the psalms, looking at the stuff that is more of it's a how-to, looking at the letters of Paul. This is how to do this. This is what you should be doing. An exposition of information. You got to learn how to look at these things so that you can know the truth, so you can be prepared. The righteousness, that is your actions, what you do on a daily basis, having that understanding of what is right and what is wrong. The gospel, that is just good news. The gospel of peace, because the gospel of peace is the only thing that is going to bring peace between the enemies of God and God. Because truly, the peace comes because of God. The people out there are not making peace with us, they're making peace with God. And we are all in God, and so that, therefore, we need to help them to have that same peace. We all have that peace together. And not last, faith, the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. I think that's very apparent. And prayer. Prayer is powerful. Prayer should not be underestimated, because it's our petition to God. It's our petition to the one that created your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, that stranger out there who is ignoring God. And in fact, he is made in the image of God too. She is made in the image of God too, despite the fact that they are not in the body. They may not be believing the words. They are made in the image of God. And we need to go to them and plead with them and pray for them so that they can understand where their position is, being enslaved and being enemies of God. Another thing that we can learn from this generation. The generation failed God because they stopped conquering themselves. Can you think about that in the context of the passage in Judges? So they go out and they're fighting, they're conquering the lands, but then they start thinking to themselves, you know what, I don't want to. I got a better thing to do than conquer this land or destroy this person like God wants me to do. I got a better decision of what God has for me. So when they stopped fighting for God, they stopped conquering the things here in their heart too. And they forgot about God. They lost sight of their power. What happened was, in this account, they start allowing the people to live in the lands. And then that idolatrous or thinking of another entity, another object being God, putting something in the place of God, putting their wooden idols, their Baals, their Asherah, their self in the place of God, and being influenced by all these other nations how God didn't want them to be. That started affecting them because they didn't do what God wanted them to do. And their desires changed. Their heart changed. And they were not fulfilling the commands of God. Now, when we stop striving for what God wants us to do, we give up on ourselves. Let's think about someone that stayed with God. You guys remember Joseph, right? Joseph, they say he had a multicolored coat. Joseph, he stayed with God through years and years and years and years. Even especially when he was being directly tempted by that woman. Was it Potiphar's wife? He was being directly tempted by her, and he refused to give into that because he didn't want to sin against God. He lived his life dedicated to his God and dedicated to his purpose. Now, how do we keep our desires in line with God? How do we keep conquering ourselves so that we can conquer the lands or the people and be pleasing to God? We stay in line with prayer. We stay in line with our plans. We have many planners here, not in a physical sense, but people. People who like to look ahead at the times, saying, okay, what am I doing with my money? Is my money serving God or serving myself? Think about that. Is it a tool for God's purposes, or is it a tool for your own pleasure? Not to say you can't buy yourself a Snickers or a candy bar or something like that, or even something even bigger than that. But the bigger picture is it serving God's purposes in your life? Okay? Day to day. What are you doing day to day? Are you spending most of your time thinking, okay, I need to go and watch as much television as I can today? Or are you thinking, okay, I need to go and build myself up so that I can be helpful to my brothers and sisters? Are you thinking, well, I got this coworker who just talked to me about a struggle they're having with their children? Is that an opportunity to help them with a better spiritual walk? Or is it an opportunity to introduce them to God so that they can walk that straight path? These are all questions that one would ask themselves so that they can, one, do the things that are of God and keep themselves in line. It's a daily, regular thing. I know that we sit and we come and we talk about God here in this congregation of people. And it's very easy to compartmentalize our day, meaning what happens at work stays at work. What happens at home stays at home. What happens in the grocery store stays in the grocery store. What happens at the bank stays at the bank. What happens in Vegas stays at Vegas, right? But it's your entire life. It's consistent. One of the easiest ways, this is more practical sermon, right? One of the easiest ways to make those transitions in conversation, to keep yourself in line, to help others, to introduce others to God, is to listen, right? Listen to what they're saying. Someone says, hey, what about the Huskers? Say, oh, the Huskers lost, and you might feel devastated for that, or they may feel devastated for that. And you say, you know what? The Huskers lost, but you know who never loses? God. You just throw that out there and see how they react to it. Or if it's something a little bit more serious, they're like, hey, you know what, man? My kid, he's just rebelling right now. He's going to school. He's causing all types of problems in school. And I'm getting all these reports. And you're like, you know what? God gives us a way to build our kids up. God gives us a way to help them to be nourished. Maybe they may not change right now, but at least it's planted in them and we can keep guiding them down this path. Or give them that comfort, like, hey, you know what? Why don't you pray about it, man? Can I pray with you? Something, like keep throwing it at them, like little seeds or little drops of water. Sprinkle it on them. And so hopefully they want to be soaked in it, soaked in the truth, making these transitions. So the failings of the generation were they did not keep working. The failings of the generation was when they stopped working for God, they gave up on themselves. The lessons that we can learn are that if we keep working for God, we have our strength in this life. When we keep working for God, we ensure ourselves into heaven. We can be certain if we're following what He wants us to do. It's a small lesson, a very powerful lesson. And I hope that you don't give up on yourself. I hope that you don't give up on God. And recognize that it starts also in the home. It starts in the home. It starts with your wife. It starts with your husband. It starts with your kids. It starts even with the friendships that you have. It starts there. There's this idea of something called a microcosm. It's a smaller version of the big thing. A smaller version of the big thing. And so if you can really work really hard at helping your family and those who are close to you, it's going to reflect what's going on here. Notice what is said in Ephesians chapter 6. It talks about the relationships of the husband, of the wife, of the children, of the parents, of the father. It starts there. Conquering that helps you to handle this. And then when this is going on, then we can help others out there, or if we can reach out to someone out there and bring them in and they could be a part of this. But let's stay encouraged. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep conquering the lands. Let's keep conquering ourselves. And let's praise our God with song.